Just because Shakespeare's play is set in Venice, that doesn't mean it has nothing to say about Shakespeare's own England, Shakespeare's London, where it was first performed, probably in the year 1597 or 1598. There's a wonderful pair of characters who act as sort of commentators on the action. They're called Salanio and Salerio. Actors sometimes call them the salads. Their lines are more or less interchangeable. They're there really just to be a kind of chorus, a kind of backdrop to the action. Beginning of the third act of the play, they come on and Salanio says, "Now, what news on the Rialto? What news on the Rialto?" Any English traveller who had been to Venice would have known the Rialto. It was the famous bridge with houses and shops on it that straddled the Grand Canal. And close to it, right by the Rialto, that was the great place of exchange. I've got an engraving here, very early engraving from just after Shakespeare's time, showing the Grand Canal. You can see gondoliers, you can see steps leading up to a piazza, you can see the people there engaging in commerce, and a very clear view as you round the corner of the Rialto Bridge. What news on the Rialto? Rialto, it refers not just to the bridge, but to the Rialto district, the place of exchange. Venice, we need to remember, was of enormous interest to the Elizabethans because it seemed to them very similar to their own London. It was a city on the water, and the Thames, running through the centre of London, was crucial to the life of Shakespeare's city. And Venice was a place associated with international trade. It was a place where different cultures came together. It was full of traders, of immigrants, just as Shakespeare's London was. So I think there's a real sense that in imagining the Rialto, the process of trade and exchange in Venice, Shakespeare is also imagining the exchange, the royal exchange, the place of trade in London. In 1568, when Shakespeare was just 4 years old, Thomas Gresham, wealthy London merchant, established an exchange, a trading place in the city of London. The original building burnt down in the Great Fire of London, but it was replaced with the same kind of shape, same kind of structure in the same location in the great rebuilding of London by Christopher Wren after the fire. And I've got an engraving here from the 1700s, an elevation plan and history of the Royal Exchange of London. But what fascinates me about this is not so much the architecture, which is that of Wren of the later period, but the structure of the exchange. It's a quadrangle. Bang in the centre, you have a desk which says shipbrokers. And then around the side, you have different areas for different nationalities and different trades. So you've got the Dutch, the French, the Italian, the Portuguese, Hamburg, great German trading town. And then you have areas for the clothiers, the silkmen, and so on. And what you have to imagine is each of these different nationalities, groups of traders, each of these different trading professions coming together in the exchange, bargaining, negotiating. And at the centre of that is the shipbrokers. The ships are the key to global trade. When Salanio says, "What news on the Rialto?" the news everybody wants to hear is the news from the sea, the news of the trading ships. And at that moment, in the third act of the play, we hear some bad news for Antonio, the merchant of Venice. "Why, yet it lives there unchecked," replies Salerio, "that Antonio hath a ship of rich lading wrecked on the narrow seas. The Goodwins, I think they call the place, are very dangerous, flat and fatal, where the carcasses of many a tall ship lie buried." The Goodwin Sands were just off the coast of Kent. It was a notorious area. It's still very difficult for shipping today because there are sandbanks, very shallow below the surface, very easy for ships to run aground. And this is the first loss of one of Antonio's ships that we've heard about. As the play unfolds, more and more news comes in, and it's bad news about his ships, and that's bad news about the possibility of him paying back the bond to Shylock and his inability to pay it back is going to have terrible consequences. But that reference to the Goodwins brings the play very, very close to London. Everybody involved in trade in Shakespeare's London would have known about the perils of the Goodwin sands.